Were you in school during the 60s? If so, what grade were you in and what was it like?
Yes, I was a freshman in 1960. School was hard at first because it was different than elementary school, and we didn't have middle schools back then. When we got home, we had to do homework, yard work, work in the garden, and help can and freeze the fruit and vegetables when they were ready.
Okay, done. What were some of your after-school activities?
After school, we would come home, do homework, work on our chores, and help Mom make dinner. Sometimes my friends and I would go to the river with our dads and go fishing. Also, we'd go see our grandmothers and go to church with her. Sometimes in the summer when we had revivals, we would go to church all week long. And during the summer, we usually had during
That's all right.
During the summer, we would have Bible school, and we would go to Bible school each night. And a lot of times at night, when there wasn't anything to do, we would go outside and catch fireflies and June bugs and tie strings around their legs and watch them fly. It was funny because we would catch the fireflies and put them in a jar at night and watch them light up.
What were your plans after finishing school?
My plans after finishing high school were to either be an airline stewardess or a lawyer. I went to business school at Elkin Business School and studied computer science, and after that I was offered a job at Northwestern Bank, so I gave up trying to do either of the other things. I ended up working there for 34 years before retiring. I went back to take some college classes and became a substitute teacher for 13 years and taught pre-K through high school.
What were some major industries at the time?
The major industries in North Wilkesboro at the time included Holly Farms Poultry, which became, of course, Tyson Foods. Then Lowe's companies, of course, that began in North Wilkesboro, that their home office is in Mooresville now. Northwestern Bank, which is Wells Fargo now. North Carolina National Bank is Bank of America now. There were furniture companies such as American Drew, Key City Furniture. There was also a casket company in North Wilkesboro at one time by the name of Turner White Casket Company.
Around 1965, what were your living conditions? Did you have a job?
Yes, in 1965 I had a job beginning in February, but before that I got married to my husband, Richard Floyd Nichols, and we bought a mobile home and had it moved on some land next to my parents' home in North Wilkesboro. And living conditions were good because we both had a good job and could afford the things that we needed to set up housekeeping.
What was it like having kids during this time?
During this time, I had my first child on July 15th, 1967, Richard Anthony Nichols. After delivering him, I took 6 weeks off from work using vacation and sick days that I had built up since there was no maternity leave at that time. I stayed in the hospital for a week, and now they send the ladies home almost the next day after their delivery. We were able to support our child and buy things for him. Also, with baby showers from both families, we were able to have what our children or what our child needed. And also, then I had my second son on October 19th, 1968, Gregory Scott Nichols.
What was the economy like during this time?
During the 1960s, there was an extended period of real growth. During that time, gas was low. Wages were, in line with throughout the country. Prices of food were really affordable because a lot of people grew farms or grew their own crops then, and except the people that lived in the cities, and they were the ones that depended on the farmers. The Vietnam War was going on during this time, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Many manufacturing jobs were created, but one of the things some people turned to making moonshine, which Wilkes County is well known for, and my father was one of those. He was written about in a book called Shortcuts to Justice. Junior Johnson, Clay Call, Millard Ashley were some of the people that were written about in the book.
Was there a popular band or singer that everyone admired during this time?
Oh yes, Elvis Presley was a major entertainer during this time. He was a huge in comparison to anything that we had ever seen as far as the teens. Rock and roll was basically invented by him. Adults liked him because of his gospel songs. When he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, they did not want to show, or they did not show him except from his waist up because of his hip gyrations. A lot of the older people definitely did not like the way that he performed in public in front of young people. The Beatles was the other big thing to hit the United States from England. They first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, and after that it was like Beatlemania, as it was known then.
What was your opinion on the Vietnam War? Were you pro, anti, and also were you a hippie?
I've never thought that war accomplished anything then as in now. It's mostly over greed and hate. I believe that it was such a waste of young men's lives, and to fight, they really didn't have a choice back then. They were drafted, so they willingly and sometimes unwillingly, even though they were drafted, did go to fight for their homeland, to keep war away from our shores. A lot of brave men did not come back from fighting over there, and as it turns out, it seems like that the war really solved nothing. Nothing was proven in return that I can think of. It wasn't fair either that those soldiers that came home were spit at and cussed at, that they were called baby killers because they were over there fighting to keep war from our country. And as far as being a hippie, I'm afraid not, because my dad would have beat my butt.
Did you know or have any friends or family that got drafted? If so, what were they like, and did they make it home?
Yes, I did have two friends, both men. One was Clay Maston and one was Glenn Nichols. They were both drafted. They were very discouraged about what was going on over there. And, when they came home, they really wouldn't talk about the war unless it had something to do, something not to do with the war. They would talk about maybe places they had been or seen. They both survived the war and came back home safely, but not healthy. they both had developed effects of Agent Orange, and that was the chemical that was used over there to thin out the undergrowth in the jungles. And Clay passed away a couple of years ago from the effects of Agent Orange, and Glenn's quality of life over the years has severely declined, and his ability to do a lot of things physically, he is not able to. He has had a lot of surgeries. I can't even remember. Actually, his body is put together with screws, bolts. They had to redo a lot of the surgeries a couple of years ago, and his wife had a sandwich bag or a quart bag full of nuts and bolts that they took out and replaced with new ones.
What were the main types of communications as in telephones? What about entertainment? Were there TVs or movie theaters?
Technology had really started to boom during this time. TVs were black and white unless you were, I think later on in the 60s, if they came up with the color TV, and if you were really wealthy, they were very expensive when they first came out. You could get a color TV, but most people had black and white. Most everyone had a radio. That was how we received a lot of the news. Of course, parents still listen to the radio a lot, even though TVs came out. The telephone, it was a landline, it was a party line, and it was a rotary phone. It was not an iPad. If you picked up your phone and there was someone on it, you just had to hang up and wait until that party finished their conversation, and then you could use the phone. We had 2 movie theaters that had shows, I think mostly in the evening matinees, because people worked, school was going on, which is a lot different than, from now where they show them all day. And there were 2 drive-in theaters, and I cannot remember, but I know they were open on the weekends, like Friday, Saturday, and I can't remember on Sunday nights.
Were there any major inventions that changed the lifestyle for everyone in America?
There were many inventions that changed many lives in America, such as microwaves, pacemakers, fiber optic cables, handheld calculators, touch-tone phones, computer mouse, which actually they invented it then, but they really didn't use it until later on. And the zip code also came about. Kevlar that was used in making vests was also invented. And needless to say, the easy bake oven, and then the smoke detector. And most important, non-dairy coffee creamer and the weather satellite, so we could sit back and have our coffee and listen to the weather.
What were women and minorities viewed as during the 60s?
Well, white women were, treated with respect as, usual, but, we still didn't get the same pay as the men doing the same job. Women weren't in line for, high-paying jobs like they are today. And minorities were, sadly to say, still treated as second-class citizens. They were not allowed to sit in the white section in movie theaters. They definitely weren't allowed to attend white schools. until the early 70s.
When JFK was elected president, what were the state of affairs at the time? Were there controversies? Were people for or against him, and who did he run against?
When JFK was running for president, the biggest conflict that I can remember everyone talking about was the fact that he was Catholic. People thought that he would always put the Pope before any decisions that he had to make about the United States. They were afraid that the Pope would interfere with maybe more important worldly decisions that he had to make. He ran against Richard Nixon. They both had a debate. That was the first one that was, first ever debate that was televised. The people that listened on the radio voted for Nixon, but the people that watched the debate live voted for Kennedy because Nixon did not look well because of his recent knee injury that happened in North Carolina actually at that time.
Do you recall the country being frightened during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yes, I do, because, of course it was all the news on the television, radio. Everyone was afraid because they didn't want to go to war again so soon. I got that mixed up with the war was still going on in Vietnam, but to go to war again with Russia over the missiles that they were moving to Cuba, they were really afraid. I think that we would invade them because of our military presence in Turkey, and that was so close to their borders. And so with Cuba being a communist country, they had made a pact or whatever with can't remember his name, it just left me. No, Fidel Castro. Yeah, Fidel Castro. Old age. But anyway, that Kennedy was always trying to be a peacemaker, and he tried to work on solutions for problems. But Johnson, being his vice president, a lot of times would want to push him into, making radical decisions, if I remember correctly.
Do you recall where you were at or what you were doing when you heard about the assassination of JFK? What were some people's reactions?
I sure do. When JFK was assassinated, I was at work at Modern Globe Knitting. That was where I was working and going to business school 2 nights a week. They announced it over the intercom, and just people were hysterical. They couldn't believe it. People were crying. It just seemed really unreal. A lot of the people in his cabinet and that were in Washington at that time did not want him to go to Texas because a lot of political tensions were going on down there. There was a group of extremists that was causing an uproar down there, but he felt like that he needed to go because to smooth those tensions and to unite the Democratic Party because he was planning on running for re-election in 1963, and then he would have been president in 1964, but it never happened.
Wow. Okay. Today is what? Today is May 20th, 2016. This is Frances Smith. She is my grandmother. Her date of birth is May 27th, 1944. And during the 60s, she lived in North Wilkesboro, North Carolina.